Welcome back to the Optics Talk podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Nightforce NX series, but specifically the NX8 1:8 first focal plane scope. Again, that's a mouthful. While I know that there are several and more qualified individuals that has discussed this will be my take based on my perspective, opinion, and planned usage or employment of this optic. We will discuss what its intended purpose is, and how I've employed this optic in competition so far, and after using it for the past several months to almost a year, what is my opinion of it? And lastly, if you are interested in the extended show notes that will be published in my blog listed in the link below in the description. Disclaimer: I admit that I am not the biggest fan of low power variable optics, but more on that later. Let's get this out of the way. The NX8 is an amazing optic, and as I have said, there have been plenty of excellent reviews and discussions about it. Specifically, 9-Hole Reviews has discussed it in depth as well as used it on several platforms in their course. Where this podcast and discussion diverges is looking at this from applying it to a specific purpose. That purpose would be an optic that would be at home on my 14.5 223 AR-15, with the exception of being light enough to carry or run several miles with, but also being capable of making first round hits on 1 MOA targets out to 600 meters, though not in the role of a DMR or SPR. The choice of reticle is actually a major concern, as it is intuitive to use mill holds for ranging targets and engagements on targets. Glass clarity is obviously a huge concern. Being able to clearly observe targets with great detail has been an issue that has been problematic in the past, especially when I've been using other lower quality optics. But thankfully the NX8 has no issues in that department. The year is 2018. I've been participating in running guns around the southeastern United States for about a year now. While I was at one of the running guns in the Clinton House in South Carolina, waiting on my turn to come up for the race, I was looking at the vendor's table, checking out the newest products. As I was making my way down the line, everyone was clamoring around one unassuming table. On it is Nightforce's newest addition, the NX8 1:8 first focal plane. Unlike other optics at the time, the NX8 was smaller, lighter, and more compact than the current offerings. This was a huge 180, which was growing to be the 30 and 34 millimeter tubes, as well as pushing into the 10x magnification range. The NX8 moved away from the current trend with LPVOs that every other manufacturer was going to at the time. And when weight really is a consideration, when running a 5K with a full loadout, ounces really do count. All that being said, I had to have the NX8 LPVO. One day. Fast forward to the spring of 2024. After running several running guns and a few local 2-gun matches, I was having issues with the optic that was currently on my 14.5 AR-15. Not to say that the optic was bad. I've talked about this optic in great detail. I've done videos on it. I have done multiple videos on it, and I've shot it in great matches. But I believe that I've come to the limits of what I could do with it. Distances we were engaging was being pushed out further and further, and the optic I was using just could not provide the optical clarity needed. While I'm not an engineer or anything even remotely close, I can say that my observations while using this optic led me to believe that I was not able to discern a sharp enough image at the distance we were engaging. I decided if I was going to have any type of advantage, I would need a serious upgrade, and at that time I was finally at a point in my life where I could justify a purchase that just happened to have the opportunity to make the purchase for the NX8 that I have wanted for so long. Side note though, Nightforce has an amazing customer service, and if you are law enforcement or military, they have really good incentives. No, they're not sponsoring me. No, I am not shilling. Nor do they even know who I am, and if they did, I doubt they would care. I think the closest that I could say they know me is they know what my debit card number is. After deliberating for about 2 weeks, I elected to go with the Nightforce NX8 1:8 first focal plane capped scope with the FC DMX reticle. That is a mouthful. Due to it being on my general purpose AR, I do not foresee myself being in a spot where I will be dialing for elevation, Plus, most matches I have been to, we were engaging multiple targets in a short period of time, so dialing is unnecessary. Because of that, there is no reason to have these exposed turrets, so I elected to go with this capped turret. The FC-DMX reticle is a very simplified version of the Christmas tree that is becoming very common on many mill-based scopes, and happens to be very similar to both the reticles on my Trijicon and Vortex optics. This commonality of design allows for ease of use and does not have any learning curves when swapping between different platforms. It also allows for the spotter on another platform to aid when giving wind calls or act as a second set of eyes when precision shots are required. The next question would be, how well does it perform at night? The performance, or better yet, optical clarity at night is still well above average. Again, this is only compared to the other optics I own and have used. While in the city, observations have been easily made out to 200 meters with complete clarity and ease. Of course, the Nightforce is known for producing top quality glass, and my statements should not come as a shock or surprise. But how well it performs in low light is still a major concern for myself, as I do work at night, and needing to observe and identify objects is a major concern and factor when deciding on a new optic. Nightforce claims that their NX8 is daylight bright, and I can easily attest to that. The only other optic that I have been behind that could compare would be a brand new Trijicon ACOG or the AccuLine line of optics. But these fiber optics do gather light, so obviously they are pretty bright. On cloudy days, I actually have to dial down the brightness so it doesn't wash out the target I'm observing. All this being said, I don't have a lot of experience behind other high-end optics, but the ones I do have, I can confidently say this is definitely the standard when we are talking about brightness. The NX8, by comparison, is a more limited optic when I compare it against my Trijicon 10 mile 3-8 by 44 first focal plane. Yes, I know, this is an apple to oranges discussion, but they both fall under what I would consider the general purpose category. The NX8 goes on my general purpose AR, and my Trijicon 10 mile can be used as a multi-purpose usage optic. But the NX8 does have a different application than the Trijicon, whereas the 10 mile is what I would consider an all-round use optic that would easily be at home on either a designated marksman rifle, such as an AR-10, or a precision bolt-action rifle, or even the Navy's famous Mark 12 Mod 1 special purpose receiver. The NX8, on the other hand, I would categorize as a short-range to mid-range optic that could easily be pressed into a specialized role. But that's not a bad thing. On the contrary, this optic is exactly the type of optic I would want on a general-purpose AR-15, or as some may call it, the scope carbine. It is light enough, with an unbelievably small footprint that weight is not a concern, but packs enough features that it can be used to aid in making hits from up close out to extended distances. The NX8 has been in use for a few months, including last year's 2024 Legion Memorial Run and Gun match, held in Tennessee, running almost 3 to 4 miles in the middle of the Tennessee countryside with full kit on the clock in a hot summer afternoon isn't what everyone would call a great vacation. But as I said before, ounces equal pounds, and thankfully this optic and rifle overall wasn't so heavy that I really noticed it that much. Any targets inside of 100 meters were engaged with the optic set to 1, and the furthest targets at about 300 meters were engaged with the optic dialed all the way up to 8x before I realized that was not the best idea. This might have been due to the heat exhaustion, fatigue, or my lack of experience with this particular optic. Ultimately, this mistake became problematic while trying to hit the steel gong at 300 while still sitting on a wooden horse, causing the shooter to get lost in the optic and unable to find the target. This highlights the issues of sometimes having too much magnification can be a hindrance versus being an aid. How precise is this optic? Well, there's no standard for measurement since it's been used on the AR-15 and nothing else. The closest that could be said was making a first round hit on a 4-inch plate at 200 yards. Though disclaimer, the rifle was sitting on a tripod when the shot was taken. At a full 8x, it did obscure a high degree of the target, but this is not considered enough of an issue for me. For reference, The center dot is a 0.2 mrad or 0.68 MOA. So at 200 yards, it was roughly 1.36 MOA. That would mean a 4-inch or 4 MOA target at 200 yards is only about 1/4 covered by the center of the red dot on the reticle. The one issue that has been observed with the NX8 is when the optic is dialed down to 1x. It's almost as if either it's not a true 1x or it has an odd distortion or warped view around the edge of the optic. This is hard to articulate in a way to understand, but when dialed down to 1x and you're looking through the optic and observing the details of the optic, you notice the view isn't right. You cannot escape the laws of science when designing an optic, and the NX8 is no different. At this price point, it should not be an issue with the NX8 and Nightforce overall, especially what I would consider a top-tier optic within my price range. Final thoughts. The Nightforce Nx8 1:8 first focal plane optic is a scope that I would consider a true minimalist scope. And as I stated early on, I am not a fan of low-power variable optics. But to me, this is what a low-power variable optic once was and should be today. The features you need and none that you don't. What was once a nice niche category about 20 years ago when I first started shooting has grown to the point where people are pushing these optics into roles well beyond what they were intended for. From 1-inch tubes, which were common 20 years ago, to today we are now seeing 30mm and even 34mm becoming the average. 1:4 was once the standard, and now 8 up to 10 power is the standard, even seeing a 1:12 power on the market. That has been the biggest point of contention when discussing the modern LPVO. Are we pushing the boundaries to the point of being unrealistic? That a mid-power variable optic would actually be a better option in many cases. Thankfully, in this case, the engineers at Nightforce were able to keep the NX8 as a true LPVO while filling it with features the marksmen need at a price point that was within reason.